Hey there, YouTube family. I'm Amrit Sandhu, and I've interviewed over 300 different thought leaders in their various respective fields, from quantum physicists to presidential candidates to business CEOs to world-renowned healers and beyond. And at the time of this video, I've coached over 250 one-on-one clients deeply through the transformations into positions of leadership which fundamentally align to their true purpose, facilitating a deep sense of meaning and fulfillment within their personal lives. And having spoken to hundreds of thousands of people on just about every continent in the world except Antarctica, I know a little bit about transformation. So if you've ever felt stuck or entrenched in your ways, or you've wanted to change, but you've actually found yourself going against your desire for change and just continuously doing the old behavior pattern again and again and again, despite you wanting a new way forward. Or perhaps you're finally ready to actually understand the architecture of your mind so that you can most effectively facilitate change and transformation for yourself. This video is going to be for you. In this video, I'm going to explain how transformation actually happens in your brain. We'll be discussing your brain's neuroplasticity and how to actually affect change using a process called myelination. The term neuroplasticity was first used by the Polish neuroscientist Jerzy Konarski, and in 1948 he used this term to describe the observable changes in the brain's neuronal structure. Neurons are the cells that make up your brain structure. You would have heard the phrase that neurons that fire together wire together. So neurons, being these two little sparks, let's look at it that way, that fire together, bing, 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 wire together. And that wire that actually gets laid down between these two nodes of neuronal network activity is actually called a myelin sheath. Sort of like sword goes into a sheath. That sword, there's a little bit of electric activity that happens between these two nodes. And when that happens, that pathway then gets myelinated. Myelin is the material that gets laid down between those two nodes. Now, the process of that material getting laid down is called myelination. And so that is the formation of a connection and a pathway. Now, the word pathway is something I'm going to keep coming back to a lot in this video. So just keep that in mind. That's actually what I'm talking about when I'm talking about pathways. So picture this, there is a vast amount of possibilities that lie in the landscape of your mental terrain, deep within the confines of our minds. Neuroplasticity as a whole refers to the brain's ability to reorganize itself, forming these new connections and pathways, largely through the process of myelination. This mechanism is key for building and changing habits, which ultimately leads to the types of actions that we take in the world, which ultimately leads to the type of character that we end up assuming in this grand story of our lives. So when we take a closer look at myelination, what we have is billions of neurons all around making up the cell structure of our brain. And these communicate through electric signals. Surrounding these neurons are these protective sheaths called myelin. Think of myelin as the brain's version of insulation, speeding up signal transmission through enhanced cognitive efficiency. So what's basically happening is every time a neuron fires together, it gets wired together. And that information, the more it does that, the more myelin sheaths that actually get laid down. And the more we've wired these things together, this is actually the formation of habits, and habits play a fundamental role in our daily lives, right? Brushing our teeth, waking up, meditating, going to the gym, all sorts of things are predicated upon the habits that we have. And one of my favorite sayings that actually came from Atomic Habits is that we don't actually rise to the level of our goals, right? We fall to the level of our systems. And by systems, generally, in that book, James is talking about our habits. Whether positive or negative, our habits actually form our thoughts, which form our actions and ultimately our destiny. And habits are formed generally, according to James, in a 4-step process by cue, craving, response, and reward. Yeah, those are the 4 steps. And it's when we actually understand this process that we can really start to harness the power of actually understanding neuroplasticity and myelination to affect positive change in our life. Because when it comes to myelination, every time a neuron fires together, it wires together. You've heard this saying, this is where it came from. A neuron that fires together wires together. And when it wires, that wire is myelin sheath, and every time it does that, it creates a pathway. Now, the good news is for those of us that are trying to create new habits is that if you consciously do that, it's like going to the gym. You're doing a rep. You're actually creating a new pathway between two neurons. A whole new habit is being formed. One of the things to recognize is you still have the old pathway in your brain. It still exists. And generally, it's quite well entrenched. It's quite a thick superhighway of information because you've pinged that highway so many more times than the new pathway that you're trying to create. But herein lies the power of understanding transformation and myelination through neuroplasticity, because now that you understand this, all you have to do is, through the power of conscious repetition, repeat the new pathway, ping those two neurons together again and again and again, as many times as possible, until this pathway becomes so myelinated that this becomes the super information highway, and this pathway is smaller than the new pathway. Now, that may sound like a lot of work, but take some heart in knowing the fact that just like the gym, it's use it or lose it, right? So the old pathway, the less you use it, the more that pathway actually also atrophies. So your biology is actually with you. As you're trying to form a new habit, the old habit is also slowly disintegrating in your mind. It just takes a significant amount of repetition of you firing those two neurons together and allowing more and more myelin to be laid down along that path to be wired together. The more myelinated a pathway becomes, the stronger and more automated the habit becomes, effectively enacting the transformation of change into your being. Okay, so at this point, you're likely super inspired, right? I know I am. Every time I hear this, I get G'd up myself. And so the key question then becomes, Amrit, how do we actually practically do this in our day-to-day lives? I want some key steps to understand how to actually transform my mind and leverage neuroplasticity to replace my old routines with new ones by constantly reinforcing what is positive, what is new, what is best for me, and ultimately weaken the old pathways and strengthen these new pathways through myelination. So how can we apply this? Let's go. The first key place to start is awareness. Now, awareness is the shift. Let me give you a quick little story to give you an example. I used to be a litter bug. Now, I know for those that are tuning in, you're not going to be super impressed. I wasn't super impressed with myself when I look back now. I used to think that when I threw my rubbish on the earth, it would literally just, yes, it would go into the drain, but the civil engineer in me was like maybe expecting too much of engineering in cities. I used to think it used to get filtered out and didn't make it into the waterways. My wife, now wife, then girlfriend at the time, used to always call me out. She's like, that is a disgusting habit. Why are you just littering? Guys, I'm not proud of this past, Amrit, but bear with me. So I used to just throw my rubbish, whatever I was eating, whether it was a wrapper, blah, 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 I would just throw it onto the earth, just thinking, that'll get cleaned up by somebody else. Not a lot of responsibility in there. Again, I'm not proud of it. My wife probably had been on my case for, I would say, at least 5 years on this matter. She was like, hey, you need to stop littering. Like, that is disgusting. Why are you doing that? And it wasn't until she said to me, that ends up in the ocean. For a year, she'd been going, stop littering, stop littering, stop littering, stop littering. And I didn't even listen. I just did not listen. I didn't hear. There was nothing in there that enacted change, right? But the moment she said, hey, that goes into the ocean, I had this visualization that came into my mind of, some of you must have seen it. It's a YouTube video where this guy is pulling through a turtle's nose this mega long straw. Like the straw's like as long as almost the turtle is. And he just pulled it out with a set of pliers, this straw, and you're looking at it going, oh my God, imagine being that turtle. And it's painful to watch. In that moment, I had this visceral, I'm getting goosebumps as I'm sharing it, this visceral realization that was me. I was the guy that was causing that issue. I was the litter bug. My litter was literally going into the ocean, impacting wildlife, And I was the guy that put that straw in the turtle's nose. Now, I know it wasn't literally that turtle, that straw, but I could see the damage that I was doing. Now, as I share that with you, I would love to say that as of that point on, when I had that boom, that visualization in my mind, I never, ever again littered. But that is not my truth. As ashamed as I am of the fact that that's not my truth, there's a reason why I'm sharing this story with you. Because as of that time, I would be walking down the road, I had litter in my hand, and I would see the wrapper, and I would just still drop it, kept walking. And that happened again, second time I had litter in my hand. I had the vision, I had seen this, that I was causing such harm, and I still had the wrapper in my hand, dropped it on the earth, kept walking. Third time round, I had the wrapper in my hand, dropped it on the earth, kept walking, like nothing had happened, nothing had changed. But it was probably around the fourth, fifth, and sixth time that I had the wrapper in my hand, and the image of the turtle came to my mind. And I was like, you know what? Dropped the wrapper, kept walking. Again, I'm not proud of this, guys. It's probably around time 6, 7, 8 that I was walking along, had the wrapper in my hand, had the banana peel, whatever in my hand, dropped it on the earth, kept walking for a bit, had the image of the turtle pop up, and felt bad enough to go, oh, you know what? Actually, I should do something about that. Turned back around, went and picked up the wrapper and threw it in the bin. It was only after like 9 times 9, 10, and 11, and 12 that really I was walking down the street, had the piece of rubbish in my hand, went to throw it on the ground and said, look, the last few times I've thrown it on the ground, I've walked 10 meters, felt bad, walked back, picked it up. Instead of going through that like silly old process and embarrassing process, let me just at least just find a bin and put it into the bin. So after about a dozen attempts, I was finally putting the rubbish in the bin. Now, at this point, I like to ask the audience from stage usually, at what point did I transform? And if you're playing along, maybe pause the video, leave a comment below. At what point in this process do you think I finally transformed? And if you pause the video and left a comment, let's come back and see how it looks. So most people will say that when I've finally formed the habit of throwing the trash in the bin, I am now transformed. But the reality, actually, and I learned this from my mentor, Eckhart Tolle, who I got coached by on the Facilitating Transformation, is that the awareness actually is the shift. I actually transformed at the point when I saw the turtle in my mind's eye that first time my wife called me out for being a litter bug and mentioned that that goes into the oceans. That was the point at which I transformed. The rest of the journey was me integrating the transformation. So awareness is fundamental to transformation. Awareness is the shift, is as far as Eckhart Tolle goes as saying it, right? And I would echo that sentiment wholeheartedly. The awareness is the shift. The rest that transpires is part of the integration process of integrating that shift into reality. But the awareness is the shift. So recognize the habits that you wish to change and understand their underlying cues and rewards. Step 2 is to actively define new habits. It's great to know what's not working, but it's also super important to figure out what is inspiring your evolution. What is it that you want to see actually happen? So identify healthier alternatives that align with your goals and values. If you don't know what your values are, inspiredevolution.com/values. I'll put a link to the masterclass. It's completely free. Get to know your values. It is the most transformative thing you can do for your life. Step number 3 is repetition. Now that you've got the awareness, you've defined where you want to go, now you need to be religious about it. It's about repetition. This is how affirmations work. This is how mantras work. This is how constantly believing, tuning in, you are rewiring your environment. People go, affirmations don't work. They do work. You also have to take a lot of action to enforce the entrenchment into the new pathways that you're building in your brain. Absolutely, but they work. This is how they work. You are affirming the neurons wiring together, yeah? But don't just talk about it. Don't just say about it. Be about it. Walk about it. Do it into your 3D reality. Build it into reality. But repetition is key. Consistently practicing the new habit to activate it and then ultimately reinforce it turns it into the desired default pathway and overrides the old pathway. And that is going to require, ultimately, step 4, some perseverance and some patience. I know it's not sexy, but the process of myelination, you are overriding something that has been entrenched for ages, in some cases decades, and now you're fundamentally rewiring a whole new pathway in your brain. The good news is, like I said before, that the old pathway is atrophying as you're not using it. It is decaying. It is dissolving as you're not using it. And because you're consciously building a new pathway, the science says that because you're consciously doing it, you are actually enforcing it, entrenching it faster. So in the matter of months, you can actually have a new pathway formed. And I have to say, step 5, please, please, please celebrate yourself, reward yourself for the progress. Every time you pat yourself on the back, your whole system gets to know, bing, 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 I'm doing the right thing. I cannot overstate this part enough. Reward yourself for the positive transformation that you're creating. You will transform that much faster. Acknowledge and reward yourself for each milestone that you receive along the way. Keep patting yourself on the back as you continue to stay inspired to evolve. So hopefully now you understand a little bit more around what's going on in your brain around transformation. So fundamentally, neurons that fire together, wire together. That wire is called myelin. And myelination is the process of forming super information pathways in your brain for electrical current and flow to just flow down harder and faster. And if you can create new pathways that then override the old pathways, you're forming new habits, and this is how change and transformation and evolution occurs in your being. I truly hope this supports you on your inspired evolution. As always, if you found this video insightful, please do me a massive favor, hit subscribe. If you're feeling inspired to truly evolve, leave me a comment below letting me know where you're going to be applying this in your life. What are you hoping to shift and transform in your reality now that you have this awareness of neuroplasticity? And if you're looking for an easy way to put in more affirmations into your day-to-day practice, I've built an affirmation meditation right here for you to go check out. Click this, take 10 minutes of your time to just zen out, listen to some affirmations, and literally start rewiring your brain right away.